Great. All right. Can our folks online let us know if you can hear us?
We can hear you.
Great. Thanks, Kelly.
Yep.
Okay. Wow, that was fast, Rory. Welcome back. Okay, so welcome everybody to our May Environment and Climate Committee meeting. We'll go ahead and start with our roll call. Alex.
Here.
Andrew here. Covey here. Kelly.
Here.
Laura.
Here.
Lauren.
Here.
Mark is potentially going to join remote later in the meeting, but said he might not be able to make it today. Neil, I'm here. Rory, here. Welcome. Serena also might be joining late online, but isn't here right now. And Smita, also Mark. Was that? Mark. Oh, Mark. Perfect. Just in time for roll call.
You guys got to scoot down a little.
Yeah, there's a ton of microphones too, so. All right, the meeting minutes from our April 11th meeting. Did anybody have any comments or corrections? Great. Not hearing any, then those will stand as is. Public comment. You want to lead the public comment?
Sure, I can. So we do have a couple of members of the public, both online and in person. So does anyone who's here in person would like to make a public comment?
Big crowd.
Would you like to make a comment?
I didn't read the minutes, so
Okay.
I'm just here to observe. I was chairman of the Climate Change Commission for Oregon and 2 terms on the Sustainability Board. And I noticed you guys are having a meeting, so I thought I would see what you're about.
Great. Welcome. Thanks.
And then for our virtual attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, you can use the raise hand function there should be a little raise hand button on your Zoom. So if you'd like to make a comment, do so now. I don't see any hands being raised, so I think we can move on.
Wonderful. We will, so reminder, public comments always open in these meetings at the beginning of the meeting. And then there's also the opportunity to send public comment via email to the committee in between meetings or at other times. We'll move on to staff updates.
Okay, a couple of updates. The first is that we have selected a consultant for the Community Climate Action Plan update. It's the same consultant who's done both our inventories and our previous update. So that's nice because then we are sure that just all the calculation methodologies and all the history is kind of intact there. We're still finishing contracting with them, but they should be underway soon. And then we're still under procurement for the electrification policy options analysis. We had to extend the due date by 2 weeks because we didn't actually get any qualified proposals. We are expecting 1 or 2 proposals by the extended due date. They just let us know that they had some issues getting them in by the original due date. And since we didn't have anyone in, it just made to extend. It made sense to extend. So those are due next week now. And so just a little bit, a slight delay in kind of kicking that off, but we're still on track to get that project going in the next month or so. And then another update is that we did schedule the kind of next steps in decision making for the tree code update. And so the Planning Commission meeting on the tree code is scheduled for June 10th. So we will send the letter that you guys approved back in, I think it was February even, or maybe March. We'll send that to the Planning Commission now. So I haven't done that yet, but in the next week or 2.
And just another update, if you hadn't heard, the Planning Commission requested a work session, which has now been scheduled for June 3rd at 5:30. If anybody wanted to watch that. That's at 5:30 on June 3rd.
And that's a planning commission work session with
session.
themselves.
Yeah, so that
Okay.
won't be public comment, but just if they wanted, because the code has actually now been released and it's got a lot of edits. There's just a lot, so they thought that before it goes to public testimony, they wanted a work session.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then the last, kind of more exciting update is that we do have, the additional request for an FTE the FTE request has been approved. It's still contingent upon, a budget adjustment. We do have budget identified to support that position, but the budget adjustment itself won't happen until, the council meeting on June 20th. But assuming that goes ahead smoothly, then, we'll be all set to add an additional FTE. So I already have a job description created and everything kind of situated. So we should be able to start our recruitment for that in late June and with the hope of getting someone here by the fall. So that's very exciting.
Awesome. But here,
Okay, I think that's it for the staff updates.
great. And then also just looking at Zoom, it looks like Smita is now here as well, just for attendance. Thanks for being here. Okay, so our next agenda item is the proposal from the Environmental Center that was sent out last Friday, something like that.
It was this Monday, but.
This Monday,
or Tuesday.
one of
yeah.
the two, that was sent out recently. And because I work at the Environmental Center, although I'm not personally, well, yeah, because I work at the Environmental Center, I'm going to recuse myself from the conversation just to keep things clean.
And I'm just gonna clarify for the record.
Yeah.
that because you work for the Environmental Center and it's totally fine for you to recuse yourself, but because you're making a recommendation, you would have a potential conflict, not an actual conflict.
That's what I
But
was,
so if you were making the decision, you would have an actual, even though it's a nonprofit, because you work for them. If you have an actual conflict when you're making the decision, because you're an advisory body making a recommendation, you have a potential conflict. So declaring it on the record is enough, but for appearances, sometimes committee members will just recuse themselves anyways. But legally, you have a potential conflict.
great.
When you work for the environment.
Thanks for the clarification. I work for the Environmental Center. And with the potential for a conflict of interest, declaring that, but going to choose to recuse myself just to keep things clean.
And I will also take the opportunity to say that I also work for the Environmental Center, so I will also declare a potential conflict of interest, and I will also recuse myself from the discussion and voting as well.
I would like to disclose that I work with one of the nonprofits that is a portion of this proposal as a volunteer. So I'm just disclosing, but I will participate in the discussion.
So you have no financial.
No financial.
Yeah, so you don't have. But that's good for this. book.
Just-
And I'm actually in the same position as Lauren.
As a volunteer,
As a volunteer with one of these initiatives, but no personal interest,
but no financial.
financial
benefit or
interest.
Oh, do we have to leave?
If you're recusing yourself, technically you
Great.
can leave, even though it's a potential conflict, but yes.
And then Lindsay, if you want to come up, so Lindsay's going to share a presentation, but just to give a little bit of context on this sponsorship request is that I think it came up largely because both myself for my staff role, but also some of the members of the energy working group, in our work trying to figure out how can we get our CCAP strategies deployed both, among the city, but also supporting the community. We have just been talking with the Environmental Center about the different programs they run and the different capacities that they have and how it aligns with our CCAP. And a lot of the discussions that we have are kind of like, well, what are the things that the city can do to support those? Those are the discussions this committee has regularly, kind of how we move our CCAP work forward, kind of in partnership with community organizations. And so the programs that are reflected in the proposal kind of came up through those discussions and how they can support the CCAP. And so that's just the context of kind of where this came from and where it is now. And Lindsay will talk about what the programs are and kind of also more a little bit why the time now is appropriate. But the ask, as you guys have noticed, is a little over $100,000, which is basically the entire CCAP program budget that we have available to us for this biennium. We'll be doing budgeting at the end of the year for next biennium. So it's really for just this calendar year. And so when we get a sponsorship request, the committee doesn't necessarily, it's not like a city policy that we need this committee to kind of approve it, but because it has such a significant impact on the CCAP budget, which it impacts all the rest of the work that you guys do, I felt like it was important from my perspective to make sure and to kind of see if the committee supports doing this type of sponsorship. So that's what we want to have the discussion about today. And then kind of depending on if you all agree with using the CCAP budget for that sponsorship, then it would move through the rest of the city sponsorship process. And I'll be able to kind of share that with our other internal stakeholders. So we'll have time to discuss after the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Lindsay now, but that's just some context for you all to kind of keep in mind and on where it came from. And I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Cassie. Are you able to pull this up? The
Oh, yeah.
presentation I emailed, and I can share it in the meantime if that's helpful, or I can just,
Do you want me to steer it?
yeah, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that'll actually just be easier.
Do you
so-
prefer, does the PowerPoint version work just as well? Or should I try the Canva one?
I think okay, whichever you're comfortable with.
I've just never done the Canva on this, so I'll just do the PowerPoint because I know exactly how it
Okay.
works.
And if for some reason it's off, I'll just do it on mine. Thanks, I appreciate it. Thank you, Environment and Climate Committee, for having me here today. My name is Lindsay Hardy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Climate Solutions Program Director at the Environmental Center. And today I'm going to be giving some more context and background and hopefully answering some questions about the proposal that we've submitted to help fund 9 different climate CCAP strategies. Okay, that looks good. You can go to the next one. Thanks, Cassie. So I was thinking, I'll give you a high level overview of the 3 different projects that we're talking about, give a little bit of the context of how these conversations came about and why this is a really critical point in climate funding and climate impact to be considering these types of projects. And then I can dig into some more of the details of the programs. We'll also review the budget and then look at some timeline opportunities and questions. I'm also happy to answer questions as we go if it's easier to get into some of the details while we have them up in front of us. So please do let me know if you have any comments along the way. I was trying not to make this a bunch of acronyms, but I'll give you a little bit more context on here. They were all just a little bit longer and we tried to spell them out. So there are some really significant initiatives underway right now that we are trying to build off some of that momentum to be able to leverage more federal and local dollars to support these types of projects. One of the most notable is the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. There are a host of incentives that are available now and are forthcoming with Oregon's application to be able to give out more of the home energy rebates. So we would like to be able to queue projects up to be able to take advantage of those incentives and stack them on existing opportunities. The City of Bend, as you all know and worked on, just launched the Home Energy Score program. And I think we all know that this is a really great tool in the whole ecosystem of being able to talk about energy and how our buildings use energy in the community. And we're really hoping to take this a step further and helping folks actually implement those projects. The Environmental Center has also just launched a free home energy assessment program. And so we're really building on some momentum and infrastructure that we have built for that program. And I'll give you a little bit more context on that in just a second. And then the City of Bend researching natural gas policies and options and some of the conversations you all have been having about the role of electrification in our climate action opportunities. And so this program will really be able to help connect folks with more opportunities to electrify their homes. So we have more concrete and local evidence and case studies and understanding of what the marketplace looks like here and how we can best support those efforts. So at a very high level, we are focusing on 3 projects. The first being the Energy Navigator. This would be in a pilot phase to help folks explore upgrades and electrification incentives and projects in their homes. The Solarize campaign is a community-driven campaign to remove the logistical and financial barriers to go solar. And then zero interest loans to help increase accessibility to folks who haven't been able to access capital or just haven't been reached with opportunities to make energy upgrades in their homes. So the Energy Navigator program is really just looking at this whole landscape of what is out there and the number of opportunities that are out there. Right now, the financial incentives are at their peak for folks to be able to make upgrades in their homes and make their homes healthier and more comfortable. But understanding how to utilize them is more confusing than it's ever been with the rollout of how the IRA has been coming in phases and different incentives that are coming and going really quickly on the state level, and utility incentives always changing, that it's hard for folks to figure out what exactly they qualify for. There's also different incentive levels depending on your income and where you live and your utilities. And so while we have this really, I heard somebody joking the other day that it's this idea, it's like the best of times and the worst of times. We have so much really awesome information and nobody can really figure out how to use it. I was even using some really awesome tools the other night to explore some of this information and comparing how our resource hub might be able to fit in amidst all this other information. And even you all may have plugged information into Rewiring America before, which is this like really amazing tool. And when I was looking for my home, I live in a manufactured home and co-op territory, and none of the information was actually like applicable that they were giving me. It actually didn't suit my circumstances at all. And that is a very comprehensive and one of the best tools out there. I know there's a lot of other products in the works as well. But it was really just illustrating that there's a lot of great information that we can customize and really connect with people on a much more individual level to help them figure out how to make these projects. You could go to the next slide, please. And so I just wanted to pause really quickly to give this so that we can compare these programs and show how they help complement each other. We have just launched a free home energy assessment program at the Environmental Center, and it is solely focused on helping ensure access to energy upgrades for folks who have not been reached with these programs before. And so it's really focused on low to moderate incomes, people of color, indigenous communities, and people living with disabilities. And with the launch of this program, we've invested a lot of time and infrastructure in developing this, from everything from database and website materials to training folks to be in the field and setting up relationships with contractors. And so we have this perfect opportunity that we can really scale the reach of this program with more folks working on it. So the idea is that the Energy Navigator program would run simultaneously and be able to build on that momentum that we have and be able to offer these same types of services to everybody in the community so that we can really act on these huge incentives right now and have the biggest climate impact in the community. But we are trying to be very thoughtful with this new program. We don't want to detract any time or attention from the free home energy assessments. That's the expansion with a parallel position that would help reach more folks in the community. You can go to the next one. Thank you. So the idea is that the Energy Navigator program would have a host of different activities that we'd be working on. First being community outreach and connecting with folks. We're already doing this at and have plans to be at all sorts of different events around Bend and Central Oregon over the summer and fall, and really being able to have this conversation with anybody who comes up to us and being able to offer the same services. It really helps streamline messaging to folks and reduce confusion. So we'll be expanding community outreach opportunities and being able to work with more CBOs and local folks to help reach more clients. The next step, once we connect with folks, is to be able to offer a home walkthrough to really get the best lay of the land, and help folks understand what they're currently working with in their homes, since so many of the incentives are based on what you currently have. And then being able to come up with some custom improvement recommendations that are specific to what folks qualify for in their homes. And then one piece that we've found when we've done programs like this before, where we've helped catalyze a lot of community engagement and interest, is helping to reduce some of the barriers of finding a contractor. And I think there can be a little bit of overwhelm as you're comparing multiple bids and they're not apples to apples, and understanding the different pieces in there. And so being able to help direct folks to contractors, and then helping compare bids so that they can move forward on their contracts and feel more empowered and understanding on what they're actually signing up for. Another big piece is following up with folks to offer ongoing support and just keep those projects moving. I think I'm a really great example. We are finally installing a ductless heat pump in our house to replace our very, very old leaky electric forced air furnace. And it took me like 4 months to get through the process, and like 5 calls from the contractor. And I think the whole idea here is to have some hand holding and help folks move through the process, and alleviate some of the burden of going through all of the paperwork to understand all of those pieces. And then there will be other opportunities to put together bulk purchase opportunities. I think the Solarize model that we're just about to talk about is a really great example of that. Over the summer, we've also been able to leverage some really great deals on induction stoves through doing community outreach and education, and working with a local shop here. And so I think those are the types of examples that we'd like to see happen on a wider scale, so that we can offer even more cost savings to folks in these programs. All right, I think we can go to the next slide. The Solarize campaign is the next piece of this. This is already been started by a group of very dedicated and energized volunteers. And I think it's been a heavy lift for this group, and we've been really fortunate to have some great expertise in the community helping to get this going. But the work is only going to continue to escalate. And when we select a contractor and are actually working on doing outreach activities and workshops and community events to get folks engaged with the campaign, and then distribute those leads to contractors and help folks through that process, we're going to need a much more support to help people through that process, to make the most of those time-bound cost reductions through the Solarize campaign. So the whole idea with this is that it's community-based outreach to really catalyze an economy of scale, and bring contractors in to be able to reduce their costs and pass those on to the community through the outreach and marketing that we're all doing. This campaign model has been well documented across the United States now, and has been operating for about 15+ years. I moved to Oregon to work on a Solarize campaign, and have seen the success of these types of programs and how they've really revolutionized solar outreach in communities. Yeah.
Can you explain how it's time bound? Is that one of the federal incentives, or?
No, the idea is to keep it time bound, to create a sense of urgency, to get people to actually do something. And so we also, because the contractors are offering such a steep discount, and the idea is that we do a really intensive marketing and outreach, and they can save some costs on generating new leads. They can't offer that discount forever because it is pretty steep. Yeah, so the idea is that we would do that marketing and outreach for everywhere from 2 to 3 months, and then folks would have a set amount of time to make a decision. So it's not meant to be a super high pressure, but we do have to put some bounds to protect the cost for the contractors. The Solarize campaign, thank you for reminding me of this, Rory. The reason we're looking at doing this fall is because there are, again, a lot of moving pieces within the solar incentive landscape right now, with things changing on the state and utility level, with incentives shifting. And so this is a really great time to be able to offer to support the contractors when some of those incentives are changing. We'll also be learning more about the Solar for All incentives, which is another component of the Inflation Reduction Act. The state of Oregon just got awarded their funds and is going to be planning for how they're going to be using their $86 million. But the idea is that they'll be doing low and no cost solar for low to moderate income households. And so we're really hoping with this campaign to be able to queue up folks who are a good fit to be able to take advantage of those incentives. And so they won't be able to install their system at the same time as that campaign's happening. Those incentives will be released next year. It gives us some time to work through some of the other potential things of needing maybe like an extra panel upgrade, figuring out how we can help them finance or pay for those types of things, and then getting them ready to access those funds when they're released next summer. This campaign was also identified in Envision Ben's process. So there's a lot of other community support and recognition that we need to be taking more advantage of solar opportunities here in Central Oregon. You can go to the next slide. And I alluded to a little bit of this already, but we're really just building on that momentum of other efforts like Envision Bend and some of this planning that's happening at the statewide scale to be able to get solar on more roofs here in Oregon. We're also excited to explore the opportunity to increase demand for storage options and looking at what our grid is going through here locally with rapid expansion and electrification of how can we actually build some more resiliency options and bring the benefits of more distributed generation here. Okay, go to the next one. And then the zero interest loan program is something that I'm really excited about. I've been following this nonprofit that we're partnering with to replicate their program for over a decade now. And they've been doing really innovative work to help bridge the gap between incentives that are out there for solar and efficiency upgrades, but just aren't accessible for a variety of reasons, either having to have upfront cash and then waiting to get tax credits or other incentives back. That a lot of these programs, even if they cover 100% of the cost of an installation, just aren't taking into account all the other barriers that happen other than just being able to pay for the project. And a lot of those being cash flow related. And so we're working with Seeds for the Soul and Corvallis to replicate their model. They, I forgot to write down the number now, have loaned out, oh, I need to look now. It's on the scale of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I know that your committee has done quite a bit of research on this. So if you all know the scale of how much they've loaned out. Okay. They've been really successful in community sourcing their funding and creating a pool that revolves through the community. So there are two different types of loans that we're considering that address cash flow issues in different parts of the process. One being a loan for contractors that they call the rapid revolve because it can be cycled through as quickly as 4 to 6 weeks. But with the no cost options that are available right now through increased incentives, there's a waiting period. So the contractor installs equipment and then they get those incentive checks back in anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. And as contractors start to do a high volume of these projects, they're actually carrying quite a bit of cost on their books. There are some areas of the state that contractors just don't even want to do this program because it creates such a cash flow crunch, especially for smaller businesses. There are some contractors who've told us they could still do a few of these installs a month here locally and others who need more support to do this. And so we are in the process of determining how much we need in that pool and how many installs a month contractors can complete and launching this program. So we would be able to pay the contractors for their work and then we would receive the incentives back. The second piece,
Lindsay, will you just clarify what that program is?
the rapid revolve
Oh,
loan.
The no cost installs.
Yes, the no cost installs right now are for ductless heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. There are also really generous insulation incentives that can cover up to 100% of the cost as well. So on some projects, contractors are looking at $10,000+ of work, sometimes up to 15, depending on how many of those upgrades they're making at the same time. And this loan program, we're specifically looking at serving low to moderate income households and communities of color because they've been underinvested in with previous incentives. So to make sure that they can actually access these programs at the same level that the rest of the community has been able to for quite some time. And then did that answer your question? Okay. And then the slow revolve is essentially a micro loan for the households to cover any gaps in incentives for reduced cost or increased incentives. And to cover the overhead that's left on those projects. The idea is that they would pay those back at a rate that's less than the amount that they're saving on their utility bills, so they still come out ahead. And the loan term that has worked for Seeds for the Soul and Corvallis has been anywhere from 1 to 5 years. They're running those all out of their nonprofit and are able to do that at zero interest because they are fundraising from the community to cover the overhead and the actual loan fund itself. Okay, we can go to the next one. Thanks, Cassie. So I think you all are aware of the studies that have been done here locally in Bend. But with 51% of our emissions coming from buildings in Bend, there's no way that we can meet the goals in the climate action plan without really addressing decarbonizing our built environment. Oh, I cleaned this up a little bit. And sorry, we have some different versions. So please pardon my like really messy circles as I was trying to figure out how to highlight those. I am excited about the possibility of being able to align with so many different CCAP strategies. There are 6 that are we're primarily supporting, with 3 additional that have some supporting pieces to them. The Energy Navigator position is really addressing the energy and buildings section and looking at increasing community education on energy efficiency, the revolving loan fund, and supporting and expanding the low cost energy audits. And then the Solarize campaign. You can go to the next one.
Oh, sorry.
Please. Thank you. It's really helping to increase community education on renewable energy and creating new incentive packages that increase the installation uptake. Well, I think there's potential, and there are additional incentives that are on the line that we're working on negotiating. We're also significantly driving down the price per watt of the solar installations. So we hope to really be able to, if not offer a direct cash incentive, as some folks might read this, we're hoping to be able to offer reductions in costs on a scale of hundreds, if not thousands of dollars off of solar installations. And then the final piece with the zero interest loans is working on the revolving loan fund piece. The other strategies that we're looking at, which I'm realizing now that this is an old version, so I'm sorry that those are not up to date on here. I'm just going to pull up this other piece so I can reference those other strategies. Are related to energy and buildings, promoting energy efficiency incentives at the time of permitting by being able to connect folks with a really succinct online hub of resources, and I think has an opportunity to be well integrated into some city processes should they wish to do that, or you wish to do that. And looking at creating new incentive programs and expanding energy efficiency projects.
Sorry, I'm just pulling up your.
That's okay. Oh, thank you. Well, these aren't new incentives that we're accessing through the free home energy assessment program. They are only able to be accessed through these types of partnerships that we've set up. And so we're hoping to be able to bring more of those increased incentives. Thanks. And then while we're not developing the home energy score program, we're really hoping to drive those projects across the finish line of folks who have gotten a home energy score, being able to monitor in the database of homes that have gotten a score and have sold, and being able to follow up with folks because we already have access to their list of improvements in their report and being able to connect them with resources to be able to help actually finish those projects. All right, do you all have any questions on the ask or the type of programs that we're looking at and how they connect or support your work with the climate action plan? Okay, we can always come back to that as well. We can look at some of the budget numbers then on the next slide. So what we are proposing is support to develop this Energy Navigator program. We are asking for support from the City of Bend. That would also just have to be supplemented by additional support in marketing, outreach, and development of the program. So the City of Bend would be helping to get that project off the ground. The Solarize campaign, while, like I mentioned, we have a great group of volunteers who's helping to get that campaign off the ground. Could use additional support in the actual coordination when the program launches this summer/fall. And then the loan program is still very much in the development phase where we're working through replicating documents and processes from Seeds for the Soul and had to develop more administrative processes on our end to be able to administer those funds and actually be able to keep track of that on the books. It is pretty complicated process as you start to be sending funds out and receiving partial payments back every month, that there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done to develop that infrastructure. And so we're asking for support in that time. Part of that time is also going to be fundraising and crowdsourcing from the community and grants and donors to actually resource that loan fund. And then, yeah, do you all have any other questions about the ask from the City of Bend or other supplementary cost of these programs? Okay.
Maybe I just missed it, Lindsay, but with the revolving loan fund, I
Mhm.
see the development and administration costs. Did I hear you right? The actual fund, like the capital,
Mhm.
that's not part of the proposal? That's like through other fundraising that you're going to be doing?
Yes, yeah, so if this covers, yes, the development of the process. I think there could be in the future another ask of the city, should the city want to consider this. In Corvallis, the city has issued a loan to the program where they've loaned out funds on a 5-year and then a 10-year term. And then the nonprofit is paying that back over time. So I think that there is potential to get really creative with other ways to resource that and that the city could help support that. But at this point in time, we're just asking for support to get it off the ground. And do the kind of like heavy lift of trying to, our goal is to have anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000 in that fund. If we're looking at financing solar projects, it just goes up quite significantly, the amount that we have to have in the fund to be able to support those. So that just takes quite a bit of fundraising time. Yeah. The timeline that we're looking at is launching each of these initiatives this year. We are doing a lot of back-end development on the home energy assessment programs and resource navigation. And that is going to be continuing to happen for a free home energy assessment program. And the development of internal processes for the loan program is also just about to get started and then will be ongoing throughout this year as we continue to fundraise for those pieces. We're hoping that if the timeline permits, that we'd be able to bring on the residential energy navigator and the person who's going to be helping with the Solarize campaign. Ideally, that would all be one bucket of work for somebody by this fall so that they're supporting the implementation of the Solarize campaign.
Lindsay, just thinking through my previous question,
Uh-huh.
I tend to think in worst case scenario sometimes.
Yeah.
So what happens if a potential funding request for the revolving loan to the city or wherever else is denied. Like, what have we thought through, like, what happens if we don't actually get funding to provide these loans?
Yeah, we have thought a lot about that because I mean, fundraising is very intertwined with all of the work that we do, and so it is challenging. We have a couple of different irons in the fire, from everything from on the federal level to looking at government entities to major donors and grant support. I think because this model has been so successful, and even entities like Energy Trust of Oregon are really heavily investing in the success of Seeds for the Soul. And we're replicating that and have the support that, I don't know, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but there is a good foundation to build from, and we're not creating something new. We have had some great initial conversations engaging in this of folks who are really excited to see this investment in folks who have not been able to access the health and resiliency and energy benefits before. But that is always a possibility with fundraising. And it is often harder than you think it's going to be. So it is a very valid point. Yeah.
Okay.
Smita?
Yeah, I have a question, and I'm not, maybe this is out of scope, or I'm not sure, but a lot of the folks that we want to reach with these programs might live in rental housing. How do these programs reach out to those folks and navigate the extra issues of that situation?
Thank you, Smita. That is actually one of the areas that we're really trying to dig into right now. Most of the assessments we have done so far have been folks in rental housing. And there are some different opportunities with the free home energy assessment program. All of those incentives can be applied to the rental housing and can be based on the renter's income. So they could actually get a no-cost heat pump in their rental house should they meet the income or other qualifications of that program. We are working on demoing some navigation of that process of just what does it take to work with a landlord to do some of that project. The state of Oregon just ran a program over the summer that really quickly ran out of funding, where they were putting heat pumps in rentals and had great success with that program. And so we're trying to learn from that program as well. It creates some definite challenges. It's not as easy as installing in houses that are occupied by the owner, but I think also just comes back to looking at the housing stock in Bend and actually helping all folks access those incentives. So it is a piece that we're digging into right now and are spending a lot of time trying to address.
Thank you.
Question, but just a comment. We've been talking a lot about education and outreach among our various groups. And, starting with website work here for the city, but I think we all know that having a website is not nearly as impactful as being able to do outreach into the community and talking to a human and getting, neighbors talking to neighbors. So I'm very supportive of supplementing the work that we're doing here, and we're going to be doing at the city with this kind of partnership with the environmental center to really get all of that information out to the community.
So I think we can switch into discussion of your guys' thoughts on this proposal, but are there any questions for Lindsay? Because if not, then she doesn't have to sit up here while we deliberate necessarily. So are there any last questions for Lindsay before we kind of switch into discussion of whether you guys support spending our CCAP funds in this way?
I have one more, which is hopefully a short, easy one. In the memo, you referenced low to moderate incomes for maybe all three or several of the three programs. Have we defined that, or how will that be defined?
Yeah, for the free home energy assessment program, which kind of runs in parallel to the Energy Navigator, anybody would be able to access that program regardless of income. But on the free home energy assessment side, the no cost options are for folks who are 60% below AMI. And so as a reference point, I believe the neighbor impact programs are 200% below. So we're trying to address that next step up. There are also increased incentives available for other folks who may not be low to moderate income, but are either living with disabilities, are person of color, or living in rural areas, and they can access those increased incentives. And that can, if they meet those demographics, they can access those increased incentives. And we have some charts available. I didn't know how far, how many numbers to put in there, and I'm happy to share that if you all want to see those charts, but it's 60% of AMI.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. I appreciate the chance to get to talk about this.
And are there any other questions online? Kelly, markers need to. Okay, doesn't look like it. Thank you, Lindsay.
Okay, thank you all.
So I'm just interested, I guess from my perspective, I'm in support of spending the funds this way because as Lindsay, I thought, well outlined, it meets many of our CCAP strategies and in ways where, from what I've heard, just across the working groups and in committee meetings, like a lot of that kind of really direct support and outreach and connecting with the community to make them available, like just to really make them aware of and understand how to use all the incentives and even incentives aside, just navigating the energy upgrade process is really complicated. And that's something that as a city entity, it would just be quite hard for us to do, especially with our current capacity. And so I feel like it meets a lot of those things that I feel like I've been hearing a lot lately. And so that's where to me, it seems like a good fit. But that said, recognizing that it is, effectively all the budget we have for this year. And so just wanting to see how you guys feel, if this is the right set of strategies to be putting those funds towards, or, if there are other things you're going to be disappointed if in a couple months, there were other thoughts out there. So I'm just open it up to hearing all of your thoughts and yeah, I guess just your initial thoughts and reactions.
Yeah, I mean, I think having been a part of pulling this all together, I think it does meet a lot of what the committee is about in terms of actual deliverables back to the community and, gain some synergies among kind of 3 or 4 different paths there. My only question would be, like, what are we giving up? I'm fully in support of everything that we're talking about here. I guess I don't really feel like I've got a clear view on what we'd be giving up by committing that much of the budget toward these. I mean, yeah.
That was exactly what I was gonna say. Because I do see the huge value in pursuing this, but I am curious. I'm only involved in the one, subgroup, waste and materials, but just kind of curious how using what sounds like our whole budget or almost our whole budget would impact the work we've been doing in that group.
Yeah, and I think so from my perspective, the reason that the money is available in the first place is because we had that budget was allocated towards the consulting work that we needed for the CCAP update and the electrification policy options analysis. That budget, we were able to use the federal EECBG funds to pay for those. So that's kind of what freed up this budget to being unclaimed. And so the thought had been that we would have it kind of free to put towards whatever projects the committee had identified this biennium. So that's why I don't have another use for it, because typically we don't actually have we certainly don't have $100,000 typically free, because when we set our budgets out, when we create our budgets, it's typically for specific projects. There's not usually just this open budget. So we're in a unique position this biennium that we have that open budget. And then, so I think what we would be giving up would basically come back to just the working groups. If any of you had other ideas in your minds of things that you would think we would need budget for, I think the website and the communication stuff for the most, I think, can be covered the way that, at least the way that we've currently kind of outlined it, with really focusing on the website for now. And the social media, because there's not a huge budget need for any of that stuff. It's more of a time need. So I think the question would be, and then the energy working group has been talking about this more, and it aligns really well with the energy strategy. So I haven't, but I don't know, I guess it's an open question. We have all of the working groups, you know, are reflected here. And so the question would be back when you think in your own working groups, are there other projects that you were hoping in the next month or 2 or 3 to say, we wanted to move this project forward? Do we have any budget available to do that? Because without the sponsorship, we do. With the sponsorship, we won't really. But the budget is really just lasting about 1 year, and then we'll have an opportunity to do new budget development, starts at the end of this year. So if there's a project that you guys are kind of thinking you want to move forward, but realistically, there wouldn't be any actual spend required for like close to a year, we can talk about trying to incorporate that ask into a future budget. So it would really be, I see the amount of time that we have left for the biennium, I see as projects that are fairly ready to go sometime soon.
So I'm sorry. I wasn't, no, I just kind of, you mentioned like website, social media, things like that. I know we've been talking about in the waste and materials group that, I mean, that was my kind of assumption from the beginning when we started talking about like last meeting, we were talking about the, updating the 1-pager or 2-pager, things like that, that would then be disseminated to the community. That sounds like it could still be something, because I feel like we're pretty close to getting something ready. So I'm curious.
I think that would be fine. Yeah, the 1-pager specifically, I think that the one question mark in the communications and outreach would be if we want to print something, like how much the printing costs would be, and that will depend on what format it takes, because we can do the design in-house. I did confirm that. And that is often that would probably be the more expensive part of that. So it would really just be printing it. If it's just printing like a stack of a couple hundred 1-pagers that we, give out.
And even if that had to, hypothetically, that part had to wait the actual like printing for whatever reason with costs, it sounds like we could still put it on, like we could do the work and publish it and then
print it next budget. But I have a feeling that just through various savings of, because that's typically just a couple, like $1,000 or something. And so we should be able to do that. We looked into what the costs are to doing a mailer, because it was part of the discussion for the Solarize campaign as a request that the city sends out a mailer in the utility bills, and it's $2,000 to send a mailer out in the utility bill. So that's kind of another, that's just, again, it depends, since we haven't defined exactly what that campaign looks like, or if we want it to be a magnet or something like that would change the cost. But they seem to be small enough that I think we could still potentially do something, or it could just be, I think, easily budgeted in a future budget cycle, because it's not tons and tons of money.
Thank you.
The only thing that I was wondering about, and I'm not in the transportation working group, but I don't remember where we left off. There was a federal funding opportunity that maybe the city was looking into, but it might have been tricky. So if that was going to move forward, or if there's a way for this funding to support that moving forward, whether it's match or, grant writing support, I feel like that's the only other time sensitive piece that could have significant leverage.
Area. And that was for that, you're talking about for the EV charging grant. And we've had a lot of discussions in the transportation group about whether we're not definitely going to go pursue that grant, but we may pursue that grant, and it would be good to have some funds available. I think we included in our EECBG application $20,000 for that. So we do actually have some EECBG funds allocated for that. So I think we should be good. We're going over a little bit on the natural gas and the CCAP budgets probably. So I haven't worked out exactly how much will be available for that, but I think we should still, through the EECBG, have some funds available for that. And including, we also in the EECBG fund budget, we included budget to pay for the low income home energy scores, because that was an eligible use. And those are also coming in just quite lower than we budgeted for. There's just not as many of them as we had. We planned way on the high side just to be safe. So there's a little bit of savings even in the ECBG funds for that. So anyway, so I think we're fairly covered for that.
I had a question along the lines of what we got to with like the mailers and the printing conversation a minute ago. I was going to ask if we, approve this funding request for the 3 programs, what can the city do to like amplify that work? Because a lot of it's kind of outreach, education, environmental center. So there's a lot of great work in that area, has its own audience, but the city has in some ways an even bigger microphone and a different audience. So like, what, is there anything, in kind, I suppose, like supplemental to just the budget request that we could, in our outreach, education, conversations we've had to like, take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, I think definitely, and particularly when we sponsor a program, it actually gets kind of easier for us to do more proactive outreach and education, because it's kind of like it's a city sponsored thing. So we have talked about the Solarize mailers, and that would be, we would be paying for that in addition to this. And I think the Solarize campaign seems to me like the most appropriate for a mailer, because it is kind of that time-bound campaign. It's got a specific call to action instead of more just general, like, here's a program to know about. And it's, you can tie it to like a specific point in time where it makes sense to send the mailer out this month because this is happening right now. But we'd be able to do, lots of outreach and education through our social media and our website for it. Are there other things you're thinking of other than just like getting the word out?
No, those were the 2 ideas that came to my mind, was
Yeah.
the utility bills and
Yeah.
social media, right? Because those are kind of the couple of the big ways that.
Yeah, so for the Solarize campaign, we definitely, and I already talked with both communications and utilities about that, so that's definitely in the works. And if we identified like another mailer opportunity, I think we could do it again. I think we want to be, like I've said before, you want to be a little bit discerning with when you do mailers, so you're not just, getting to a spammy level, but, yeah, we can definitely do those 2 things. And then if we also have, well, I guess other ways that we've talked about, are the city has, we've got this, like the neighborhood trailer. Have you guys heard of that? We have this big outreach tool where it's this big trailer that neighborhood associations or city staff can reserve to do community events. So we've talked about using that to do community events to support. We talked about it in the context of the Solarize campaign, but perhaps other events, I guess, if there's other things for the energy programs, we could do that. And then particularly with me bringing on an additional staff, so we just have more capacity for the city to, be at events or just help in other ways, we'll be able to do that. We just haven't defined all of them quite yet.
I think one other big one would be to bring and ask to fund the revolving loan fund from the city. Yeah. Which maybe we can help with, or, think about how the committee can support that.
Well, that one. I don't know if you've talked to
No, I haven't.
Samantha,
I have
our
not, no,
finance.
no.
Yeah, and so revolving loan funds, I mean, we've done that with CDBG, with our affordable housing. That's a concept that we're obviously familiar with, but and I'm completely speaking out of turn here because I'm the lawyer, not the finance person, but I do know when we've talked about the city giving loans and operating as a bank from our who's now our Sharon Boyda, who's now our chief financial operator. I would just want to talk to our finance department. There has been some view at the city that we do not have the staff or the ability to act as a bank. Like, that is just not something that we are set up to do. I don't know what our current thinking is on that. I just want to be careful to put that out there as something that we do. Because that is something we have. I mean, there's so many things that go along with loans and the staffing to track. It's a whole nother program that, besides the funding of where that would come from, is a question, but even just the ability to do that has been something we've said, no, that's not something that we can do at our size of a city and our resources. I'm not saying that we couldn't or wouldn't. I'm just saying that's something that's a much bigger discussion for any purpose.
And the reason I hadn't talked to them about it yet is because the thought was we just don't have a lot of information about like the models of what that looks like yet. So I think the idea was that with this support and, that's kind of the step that the environmental center would take, is first developing that program and trying to understand what it would look like. And then once we have more information, like talk to our finance team about it and see if it's, because I think we wouldn't, in this case, we wouldn't be loaning out to the individual people. It would be like one loan to the environmental center who would then loan it out. So I just didn't know if
Yeah.
that changed
That,
things.
that might. I
Yeah.
mean, we've worked with neighbor impact.
But-
I mean, we've worked definitely with organizations
Yeah.
more, as a model.
Yeah, so anyway, I think that's part of the work that we would begin to do with the funding and start having those discussions more specifically.
What's the decision-making process for a funding request like this? Where's
Yeah,
the?
so I just sent you a possible motion.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
so you're the vice chair, correct? Yes, so, it seems, yeah, we should have talked about this before, Cassie. We usually
Right.
put I know that's my mistake. You told me this was coming up and I should have thought, oh, they need a motion.
Yeah.
Because we usually post it in the agenda for you to have. So I just scrambled and drafted a potential motion if I'm tracking this all. So what you need is a motion for your recommendation to council to support this sponsorship. So Cassie, if you want to look at what I just
Yeah, I was
Thank
trying
you.
to.
and
Trying to
see,
get on the
and
spot.
so the couple things came to my mind. Your motion, I think, should include to support all three projects, if that's what you're saying, because you maybe dug into this in a way that would be helpful to council to know what your thinking is. Do you want it in the amount as proposed? If that's what your thinking is, then that would be helpful to tell council that, so that they're not thinking, oh, just some generic, yeah, we support this in concept, but do you actually support it as proposed? I think would be helpful to let them know. So,
And I'm just trying to get, sorry, I'm trying to just get it up on a slide.
yeah. So what we usually do is either have it in your packet, or if it comes up, I usually send it to one of the council members and say, who's gonna make the motion? Here it is.
While we pull that up, we just talked about like, a lot of our discussion was, what are we missing out on? Like, if we're using all the funding we have, are there things that we want to pay for that we will no longer be able to pay for? It sounded like a lot of those were unknowns, like printing, a few $1,000s for printing mailers and things like that. I'm wondering if we should consider whether, and I would want Cassie's input on this, like whether it might be an idea to consider like keeping a small amount if we are feeling like we're going to approve this. Like, is the likelihood that we will need a little more money to do some of those other things great enough to where we might say, well, we're gonna approve this, but minus $2,000 so we can do some of these things we want. Just a thought, because if we end up in a tight place.
And I think if it's really just like less than $5,000, I feel confident enough that there will be other savings for that.
Okay.
More than 5,000, I would say we would want to reserve a little more. Mainly because those, the low income home energy scores are coming. I budgeted $20,000 in each year for that, and it was like $3,000 this year. So there's quite a bit of savings if we're talking just in the couple of thousands. But I didn't like add it all up exactly.
Yeah, and I should have said, I move to recommend. Well, so I'm gonna change that, Cassie. So somebody that makes the motion would say, I move to.
So I can stop sharing.
Then you have second.
Are you guys ready to entertain a motion? We are over noon, so it would be good, but I also don't want to rush the struggling, I'm sorry. Let's read back up. Are you guys ready to entertain a motion? Is there any other thoughts?
I'm ready, knowing that like if you feel confident that we do have a couple thousand to still pursue a couple things, then I'd be comfortable moving forward.
Cool, I'll move to recommend council approval of the sponsorship request from the Environmental Center for 3 projects to support the city's community climate action plan in the amount of $100,050.
I'll second.
All in favor? I can't see online.
Mark, are you still there?
He said he was gonna have to drop off the call early, I'm not sure.
Sorry, yes, I did have to, just back for a moment. If it's, are we vote, I'm sorry to disrupt, is it,
There was a motion to approve the sponsorship request and a second, so we're just getting a vote on that.
yes, I would vote for that.
Thank you.
All right, motion carries. Do I get to see that?
Say any opposed?
Any opposed?
I think so.
And two
Recusals.
recusals?
And two recusals. So that was everybody in favor, and there was 8. Yeah, I'm sure we had a quorum.
Okay, well, thanks, everyone. And then, just so you know, we do have an internal next step where we have an internal sponsorship committee. That also needs to review these and approve these. And so this one's a little bit different because it's kind of coming through the CCAP program. So that is one more step that we have to go through. And if that changes anything, I'll just report back to you all and to the Environmental Center, of course, but yeah. And if it goes through the sponsorship committee, the actual, it would go to the council on the June 5th meeting, so. Okay, thanks. And I think it would be a good time to maybe break for lunch. We're running a little bit behind, so if we could try to just do like 5 minutes, like grab a sandwich and then sit back down, that would be great.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we are back online. If somebody online wants to give us a thumbs up or let us know that you can hear us.
We can hear you.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So, we are running a little bit behind, but we're gonna jump into CCAP update process, with Cass.
Okay, so we're officially starting the CCAP update. And what we're gonna do today, the goal for today is to to start the CCAP update. I want to make sure that you all feel like you have a firm understanding of like the current status of the update, of the current progress and status of the CCAP, because the next step that we're going to go into is coming up with a bunch of new actions. And of course, it will just make a lot more sense to do that if you all feel like you understand kind of what's been done, what's left to do, and that sort of thing. So what I am going to do is go through, so initially I had planned on going through like each action by action, which I did a little over a year ago. And I think we probably had some new committee members since then. Go through action by action and just kind of share quickly what the status is of that action. Because we're short on time, I don't think I'm going to step through each individual one, but what I'll do is just kind of go through each of the 4 sectors, read off the title of each strategy, and then I'll pause and ask you guys if you have any questions or which ones you want me to elaborate on, just because if there's ones that we're all on the same page about, I don't want to waste minutes talking about those, if that sounds good to you all. And then what I included in the meeting packet was both kind of the Excel sheet, like snapshot of like completed action versus, you know, like just the kind of status of each action. And then also the longer form memo that has more detail on like what the actual progress is of each of those. And so you guys can refer back to those as well. Does that sound good? And then at the end, there are, the other memo I included is there are 4 actions that in my view are just complete, and we can kind of move off the CCAP list to being like, these are done. And so that's the decision you guys will make today, is if you agree with those 4 being ones that we can kind of move off into a completed list. So really quick, the first slide is just showing kind of the overall status of the actions. We have 4 of them are totally complete. 9 of them are what I'm calling complete and ongoing. So those are actions where we actually have, I would say we could say we satisfied the action because we have finished some sort of concrete activity in it, but the way that the action is they're just kind of ongoing. So we wouldn't like take it off completely because we can either do more or we can do it again, or it's something that just requires ongoing. It's like more of an ongoing program. So there are 9 of those. Then we have 18 that have started and are in progress, but those would be 18 that we have not actually we don't have any actual outcomes for yet. And then 11 of them just haven't been started at all. So in energy supply, the strategies, just to remind us, are that the 2 of the big ones are providing 100% renewable electricity supply to the community, and then developing a program that allows residential and commercial customers to offset their natural gas use. So those are 2 that were somewhat at the mercy of external processes. So they're moving slow, they're moving slowly, but we're kind of engaging in them still. And then the other ones in the energy supply are, well, the big strategy is expand distributed commercial and residential solar. And the actions that we have under that are increasing community education on renewable energy, promoting renewable energy incentives, and then creating new incentive packages that increase the installation of renewable energy systems on buildings. So those are ones that, we're working on through our outreach and education work. Then we have also in the ES3 strategy, the strategy about expanding distributed solar, basically, is creating a revolving loan fund and then developing community solar projects. Also piloting microgrid and battery storage projects, supporting and expanding workforce development programs in renewable energy trades, and creating a commercial property assessed clean energy program. The one that we haven't started is the supporting and expanding workforce development programs. And then the last ones in the energy supply sector are building a biodigester at the wastewater treatment facility, and then installing solar panels on public buildings. So that's all in the energy supply category. Which of those do you guys want me to dive a little bit deeper into, or do you have questions on the current status?
Just quickly, the biodigester project, we got a presentation about the like feasibility study or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember the timeline for those types of capital projects is like forever. Do you know the status of that, or like kind of where they're at and when they would be needing to make capital decisions in one direction or another?
Yeah, so the what we did so far was not even really a feasibility study, it was an alternatives analysis to identify like where in the region there is there would be a potential facility to manage all of these wastes and generate energy from them. And the water reclamation facility was identified as probably one of the better locations to do that. And so we're about to start our water reclamation facility, a new master plan for it. And we're in the process of finalizing the RFP for that. So that's going to be a multi-year process. And in the facility plan, it's really just kind of looking at like, what are all the elements that this facility is going to need to have. And so we did include in the RFP for that, there's language about in making sure to include like renewable energy generation as part of the master plan. So that's kind of the next step that we're at now, is getting that technology to be included in the master plan. And then I think actually in a feasibility study would probably happen after the master plan. And then once we did a feasibility study, you know, we would determine like yes or no on it.
Okay.
So the master plan is the next important step. And that's actually the member of the public that was here was talking about that, because he does that kind of work. And I know he's working with them to try to encourage us to do that project. And it sounds like he might actually reach out to this group to talk more about that. But he's also been told, as I've been told by our staff, that the next step is to just do the master plan, because it's hard for us to, like, it has to be within the context of the whole master plan.
Mhm.
So that's what we're doing now, but
Okay.
that'll probably be a couple of year project in and of itself. So.
Thanks.
Any other questions in energy supply? Lori?
Any breaking update from Pacific Power on community green tariff program development?
Not really, and what I wrote in the progress report is based on the conversations I've had with the current energy working group, and it was not a formal decision, but the current energy working group, and even in previous energy working groups, like when Bill and Cedar were working on those topics, is that I have not sensed a huge interest from the committee in really even spending a lot of time and resources on that project, because it's so slow and kind of out of our control. And so subsequently, I have not stayed quite as engaged as I was at one point, because even to follow along was like a lot of time. And it's still primarily that PGE is creating a tariff and a program that they're moving forward, and they're working with a couple of communities that are highly interested to develop that. And then Pacific Power's plan, as far as I can tell, is to kind of wait and see how that goes, and then probably replicate it for their customers. But I think that they have less customers that are like, we want it now, and kind of driving it on their end. So like, we would probably be one of the ones that would be the most likely to do that if we wanted to. So I don't know the exact status, since and then a lot of it, there was a group that was meeting monthly that I was participating in, but that kind of wrapped up while I was on leave. So I don't know exactly like how it all concluded. So.
That kind of matches with my recollection, like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
I remember having that discussion, and it was like, well, Pacific Power is stalled or whatever. We haven't heard from them about it, so we need them to like move first, and then we can work with them.
Yeah.
So I think we decided at the time to not, you know, keep
Yeah.
pushing it or whatever. So that's why I was asking again today. It was like, oh, has anything changed since then? Because
And I think if I had been asking them to engage on it, like, I think they would have, but I just have kind of stopped asking on that, kind of based on that direction, so.
Hmm.
And that might be something that we want to talk about when we're creating new actions in the energy supply group, is like, if we're not actively, or maybe we can reopen the discussion. Do we want to actively pursue that? And what would that look like for us? Like, how can we start, what steps can we take to start pushing on that more? Or if we don't want to do that, is there something else we want to do? Or do we want to just take that off because we have the new, you know, now there are clean energy standards, which there were not at the time that we created this first CCAP. So I think those will be big discussions to have in the energy supply group. Any other questions on energy supply? In energy in buildings, the first is about participating in code update processes and vote for advancing energy efficiency in codes. This one has also kind of encompassed just any statewide advocacy that we do to support energy efficiency policies at the statewide level. Which we do try to participate in. We don't always proactively do that. Developing and delivering outreach and education campaigns to promote net zero ready building standards, increasing community education or on energy efficiency and available energy efficiency incentives, promoting energy efficiency incentives through the building permit process, creating new incentives and programs to expand energy efficiency projects. So that's just creating new incentive program, create revolving loan funds, again, supporting workforce development programs in energy efficiency trades, exploring options for demand response programs. So all of those that I just read were in kind of the bucket of just the various ways we can just improve the uptake of voluntary energy efficiency projects in buildings. The next strategy is implement benchmarking and disclosure programs for energy performance. And the ones that fall under that are the home energy score program, developing voluntary disclosure and benchmarking programs, which we haven't really started on, support and expanding low-cost energy audit programs. And then the next strategy is about promoting smaller and denser housing options through incentives. And those are all the energy and buildings ones. Any questions on that? I guess one thing that I'll just, so you guys are aware of on the voluntary disclosure and benchmarking programs is there's a statewide effort to establish like a building performance standards statewide that will be a statewide program that will have like a cutoff of a certain size building. Some of you know more about this than I do. As part of that effort, Earth Advantage received a federal grant to kind of help be a technical expert in that project. And in addition to that, they are working with a handful of cities to start developing, but kind of soft developing like benchmarking programs for other jurisdictions. And so we're participating in that. And it's not entirely clear what that looks like yet, but the first year or so is going to be basically just a lot of research and fact finding with Earth Advantage's support on like, if a smaller city like Bend wanted to do a building performance standard, what would that look like? What would the benefits be? What would the cost be? What would be how do you right size something like that for a local government? So we're participating in that as well as like 5 other cities. I can't remember off the top of my head who they are. I know Beaverton. That's the only one I can remember. So that's something that we haven't talked about really much at all yet. I've not done a lot of research into that myself, but I will be starting to kind of explore that a little bit more. So.
And that building performance score program that's in its development at the state right now has a carve out for communities that are doing things above the phase in and the scale, the square footage scale of the building performance standard. And so there's a significant component of that even buildings that aren't required to meet the kind of ratcheting efficiency requirements still have to engage in the benchmarking component. So that that is, yeah, happening in a statewide effort, but there's opportunity to engage, which Cassie's involved in that, which is great.
Thank you for that.
Cassie,
Yeah.
sorry. The last slide, the smaller and denser housing options. That second bullet, CFAC and other statewide housing initiatives will continue to encourage smaller and densing. That's true, but there's a big local implementation piece. Like Bend will soon be designating its climate friendly areas.
Yeah.
Zoned for denser housing, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of local choice about like how big those are and
Okay.
what some of the zoning
Yeah.
is there. So it's not completely state led. Like there's
Okay,
some
yeah, so you're saying.
local
there's
stuff that,
Additional opportunity to engage.
yeah, additional
Yeah.
opportunity to engage.
Okay, perfect. And I think it'll be good this time around, maybe it'll come up in the transportation, but maybe it'll also come up in this strategy, to kind of like. Look at how we want to interface what's happening through CFAC and other land use things and how we reflect that in the CCAP. Just if we want to approach it differently than we did last time. And I know our growth management department they're very interested in like having better integration between what they do and we do. And we're just trying to figure out like, what does that mean? And, what needs to be in a plan versus what does it mean practically and like how it fits together. So I think it'll be great to have that discussion. I guess when we come up with the new CCAP actions, or maybe it's its own discussion, I don't know.
Yeah, they're working on their growth plan and their timing for implementing the CPAC rules, and also the plan is to do the UGB expansion and urban reserve. So they've got a whole growth plan that they're working on. So it probably would be smart to get them, like Brian Rankin here.
Yeah.
Or Brianne here to talk to you about what their timing is with I mean, they're thick in that right now. I just had a meeting last week with Brian Rankin and their timing. So that you can fit it into your schedule.
Yeah.
As well. They're really big on Gantt charts and schedules.
Yeah.
It's hard to read, but planners love them. So you could see it. They've already got it.
Yeah, and he is going to the community building subcommittee next week.
Next week he is.
And then I think to council after that in a work
It's
session
coming up
with
fairly
that.
soon.
So it might be good.
Mhm.
We can ask him to come here if we want to dig into it, but it might be good to, if anyone's who's really interested in that, to watch those. And him and I we're trying to coordinate. We are trying to coordinate better. So there might be more to come on that topic. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on because we're like super short on time. In transportation, we have us supporting the transition to electric vehicles with, this is the strategy level, but the action level is just the creating the EV readiness plan. A strategy about increasing bike and pedestrian trips. A strategy about increasing transit ridership, and we kind of reflected several of the transit strategies that CET relies on through and is kind of in their master plan. So the mobility hub program, high capacity transit corridors, expanding and then just kind of broadly expanding transit service coverage consistent with their master plan. And then we had an additional action around coordinating with the school district to encourage the use of public transit for getting to schools. That's something that we've not really engaged directly on. And as a disclaimer, I have not actually talked with the transit. I've talked to them about the mobility hubs recently. I have not gotten a recent update on where the rest of those things stand. We had a strategy about promoting ride sharing, which we had not started, and then a strategy about converting city and other public agency fleets to electric vehicles and alternative fuels, which we're making pretty good progress on. I think that's all the transportation. So any questions in the transportation space? Will you go back to the first?
Will you just give like a 2-minute update on where the EV readiness plan is? If you can.
Oh, I'm just laughing because we've been talking about it with the transportation group quite a bit. We have a couple of EV, so there's several parts to the EV readiness plan. Some of them we moved forward with, like the code stuff that was as required by CFEC. There's kind of promotional and outreach and education pieces of it that we have not started yet, but I see us as being able to hit a lot of those through the website improvements. And then there's a big part of it is about deploying the public EV charging infrastructure, which we have been a little bit limited in how much progress we've been able to make. We have two pilot projects coming soon, hopefully, to get some new chargers in the ground, even those we're having like just unbelievable difficulties with. Some of which are our own difficulties, and some are, the partner, working with partners. So we have two projects kind of coming up, and then that was where we had been planning on applying for the charging and fueling infrastructure grant as a way of kind of doing a big investment in charging infrastructure. And as we have started to look at that, I have expressed to the transportation group already that I don't feel like our organization really has the capacity or the readiness to do that. And so I think it's something that we want to improve upon, but we don't have there's not a lot happening other than the two pilot projects right now, but I think I'm trying to figure out how we can get there. But it's just a lot to figure out. I will say that I am planning, I wrote it here, but I have identified, that area of work as a priority project for the new staff person, because I have felt really, capacity constrained and really digging into it very much. And so I'm kind of hoping like some new energy around that and just having the time and the space to focus on that, since we do have the plan already and we want to implement it. So.
Can I ask one more question? Are the challenges like city stuff, or I guess my question is like, are there partners that we can partner with, whether that's other cities, ODOT, others, to like join in on things that other people are doing versus us having to do it all ourselves? Does that make sense?
I think the things that are kind of straightforward to partner on, we're trying to. One of the pilot projects is an ODOT partnership. It's ODOT provides funds and is doing this big statewide. They have a contractor who's putting chargers in everywhere, and we're trying to get one here in the Mirror Pond North lot. We're still having challenges with even getting that to work. So we're trying to find those partnerships, and where they're fairly simple, we're pursuing them. One of our challenges is just not having there are probably partnership opportunities that we're just missing, that we just have not had the capacity to really understand really in depth yet. So that's a capacity challenge on our end. And then definitely, deploying, our own EV charging infrastructure, even though we would partner with, a third party to do that. That's definitely capacity constraints internally for us. Yeah. Okay, any other questions in transportation? Okay. And then last is waste and materials. So the first strategy is about improving waste recovery, and we call it non-food waste recovery because we have a separate food waste recovery strategy. So that's improving recycling at multifamily residences, developing a recycling and waste reduction program targeting tourists, and then investigating and investing in facility and infrastructure upgrades to meet long-term needs of the solid waste system, which is mainly county-led. There's actually a lot of exciting stuff happening on that end. We have a strategy about expanding the use of low carbon concrete in city projects, and then a strategy about improving food waste recovery, which includes expanding the curbside compost program and developing and delivering educational programs to encourage residents to compost. A strategy about improving construction and demolition waste recovery, and then a strategy to develop programs that encourage food waste prevention. So on the prevention side, as opposed to the recovery side. And then I think that's the last strategy, is about developing outreach and education materials for reducing consumption. So again, that's a strategy about focusing the outreach and education on waste prevention in general, as opposed to waste recovery. So that includes outreach campaigns and then also training programs for industries to prevent waste. So a lot of this will be addressed in the website and communications effort, but there's more in there as well. So are there any questions about that?
I do. So I think the two questions I had, the first one was just on the completed actions. You listed the action W3A, I think, which was the expand and the curbside composting to include all materials, but also says increasing participation. And I feel like, yes, part of that action is done, but the increasing participation piece still feels like there's a lot of opportunity there. I think the stat we got was 60% of folks have signed up for curbside for yard waste pickup curbside. And at least my impression from the meeting that we had with the haulers was it doesn't seem like it's a priority for them to increase that number further. I think there's a lot more opportunity. And I think one of the things I heard in that meeting was the city could work with them to make it kind of just part of it, but like recycling, which involves some that's a whole discussion, but I'll just leave it at, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So I do want to, if we do say that's completed, I think as part of CCAP update, we should still have something that says increasing the participation further until it gets to closer to 100%, I'm guessing. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And then the other is looking at your memo for many of the education and outreach actions. I just want to clarify that it is going to be addressed as a first step in the website project, but I just want to make sure that's not that doesn't fully complete those actions, especially because some of the actions mentions like creating a program around tourism or uses the words program or campaign. And I feel like the website is just one small piece towards that.
So we'll talk in the next slide, once we're finished with the update, we'll talk about the completed actions and which are proposed as complete actions and which aren't. And I'll answer your first question when we get there. But if we could just circle back and to see if anyone has any questions on the waste and materials actions. Or just the status of them, just making sure you understand like where they're at today.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So then that it's a good segue, Kavi, into there are 4 actions that I am proposing as complete. So these are the ones that we would take off the list. We can, I think in several cases, there may be something else that we do in that area. And so I would propose that we create new actions to kind of like bring it to the modern, step. So the actions that I think are fully complete include the creating the CPACE program. That was one that was established by Deschutes County. So that's good. We didn't have to do that ourselves, which is great. We supported it, but that's taken care of. The second one was developing a home energy score program. I think that's one where there's more we could do around the home energy score program, but the action really was developing the home energy score program. The third one is developing the plan, the EV readiness plan. So it's developing a plan that anticipates EV growth, determines necessary charging infrastructure to accommodate growth, and defines mechanisms to encourage the expansion of public and private charging infrastructure. So we have the plan. I think this is one that is very ripe for, having a new action that says we will implement that plan. But the part about creating it, I would like to say we've done that. And then the fourth one is expanding the curbside compost program by accepting more materials. And I think Covey's, I completely agree with your statement about it kind of having the 2 pieces there. And I would propose that we mark the one that we have as it is today, having that complete, because when we made the strategy, that the biggest intent of the strategy really was about expanding the use to all food materials, because that was a big discussion at the time we were putting the CCAP together. So I would propose that that one is complete because that's what it meant at the time, and then creating a new action about just increasing, food waste recovery. Yeah, exactly. So those are the 4, and we only have 10 minutes left today. So I don't know, I think in our next meeting, if you guys don't feel ready to make a decision on this today, our next meeting, we're going to be talking about refining CCAP action. So we can finish this up next meeting too. But I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are on these 4 being complete. And then the other side of it is that they're all the ones, I didn't list them here. I don't think I did. That there's a bunch of actions that are complete but ongoing. So I think, Cody, that was kind of the second part of your question, are the ones that those ones wouldn't be complete now anyway, because we're just starting that. But I think those would be ones that would probably all fall into the complete and ongoing category instead of just saying they're complete. So we don't have to like decide that. We're not deciding we're stopping any of those.
Yeah.
That's just not part of the decision today.
No, I appreciate that clarification. So I think based on that, I would support including that action as complete.
Okay.
That makes sense.
I think the complete and ongoing is, or I really like that we have that category because it's come up in the past as well. And I think it's maybe a lesson as we're drafting these of like, what does a discrete goal mean? Could it ever be accomplished? And sometimes because there wasn't as clear of an outcome of like, we need this one thing to happen, we don't know what the pathway is going to be. They were written in a way that were more open.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something to consider as we're writing them in the future. But I think it's a good thing to be like, hey, this thing is done, and recognizing that that doesn't mean all work in that area is done. It just means that that discrete action has been completed. So.
Any other thoughts on this list?
In that same train of thought, like, even though we're gonna take these off of the CCAP, let's keep them for reference, so we can remember to do the things that were just talked about. Cause I had the same thought with the home energy score. We've had all these great ideas about, okay, how can we use that data?
Yeah,
So I will be interested in another action along those lines.
yeah. Okay, that sounds good. I don't think.
Yeah,
Was there,
yes, this is Smith Online. I would agree that it's good to like mark these as complete, but then go through each one of these and say, what additional actions do we need now that we know a little bit more about each of these completed actions, like the compost program. There's more to it that we need to work on.
yeah, great. Okay, if you guys are good with that, I think it also segues nicely into what I wanted to just talk about with the CCAP update process, because it's kind of like, how do we take what we have and then integrate that into the CCAP update? And so do we have any more comments on this? Okay. So just really quick, I wanted to kind of map out the next steps, but just to make sure you guys are kind of comfortable with the process and make sure that we're kind of, we're gonna capture all the things that we want. So, and then in June, our next step was for me to come to you all and bring some of the actions that I think, any actions that I'm just proposing that we refine the language a little bit. And so like some of the things I'm thinking of are a lot of the partner actions that we have. We had kind of the way that we set it up initially was like just capturing the partner actions as these kind of first person actions. And one thing I would like to do is kind of switch the language on those to be defining the city's role in relationship to that action a little bit more, rather than having just like something that the county is in charge of. Having it be more like, okay, what is the city going to do to kind of support something that the county is in charge of? So those are the types of changes that I'm planning on bringing to you all next week or next month. And then that'll be kind of the next step in the CCAP update process. And then after that, we're going to go into the new action generation stage. And so that's kind of the exciting part where we're actually defining what the new CCAP is going to be like. So one of the things that I've asked the consultant to provide for you all going into those actions is just a like a short, like I think it's just going to be a 1 to 2 pager of best practices from other cities' climate action plans for each of the sector areas, so that that's something that you guys can have going into that as kind of like food for thought. You are not limited to the actions that are on that list, but it's just to give you guys an idea of like, what are other cities doing in this area that we might not have thought of. So you guys will have that going into the June, the new action meetings. And I guess I wanted to hear if you guys had any thoughts on like, are there other things you guys feel like you need to do to prepare, or other information you need before we get to that new action generation stage? Like, do we need info from other departments, or do you want other departments there, or or do you feel like if you have kind of a list of these best practices, you guys are ready to like jump right into like defining what the next CCAP steps are going to be?
I think it could be helpful to have some, maybe it's part of those best practices, but specifically calling out public funding opportunities that could align with the different actions
Okay,
and the time horizons for those.
okay,
And like, I think just like having some shared awareness of what the big chunks of public funding coming forward, like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, what implications that could have for this work.
okay.
I've talked about this before, but I think budget. Understanding where the budget will come from for these, and then. To your point, I think it's like, it depends on the action if we're gonna need support from other departments or like. Understand what the needs would look like to get something done. So I don't know if that's like in this phase or later on, it's like, hey, we really want to do something with this and it's gonna involve. Planning and this, and like, how do we ensure that we have that support before we like put something forward? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think kind of for both of those, so I think we can try to identify this potential sources of funding, but. What we'll do is we'll come up with the new actions, we'll get some, but then, and we're gonna have a later phase of like the work planning and the resource identification. So I was thinking more in terms of defining the resource needs and the potential funding sources for it. For the actions that we want to move forward, rather than the other way around, just because one, if we want to explore like 300 different actions, like it doesn't make sense to fully explore all of those, but two, I think that part of it is like, what do we need to do to meet the goals? And then saying, this is, we can work towards what we need to get there, So I was kind of seeing the actions as driving those conversations, and then those become part of, like what we need to figure out. And I think it is also good to think about, well, what's available so we can like take advantage of that too. So I think it'll kind of come up in both pieces. The part, Lauren, that you're, I think the funding part can kind of come from both sides, like what are the potential funds, and then, but it's not like we can only do actions that we have some clear funding for. And then the kind of like, what will this look like? That will come later, because we'll look at the set of actions and then we'll like nail out those work plans. Yeah.
I think one other thing that would be helpful is like what has come down at the state level that will address some of these, and what's the timeline? So that if we're like, okay, we think the 100% renewable plan is gonna happen, like, I think there's just some questions there on like what's actually happening, benchmarking, et cetera. I think that could just be like a really helpful.
Okay.
And I think we have some of that was maybe already done by Good Company in their projections. That included some level of state policy
Yeah.
in their estimates of things, so they
Yeah,
might
we-
have some of that base.
Yeah, we definitely include that. There's the ones that actually like directly hit our greenhouse gas inventory in ways that we know. There's only like a couple, like there's the clean energy standards, and then I forget, there's maybe one or two other ones that are included in there, so we can make sure at least those are covered. It'd be a little hard to say like comprehensively every single like potential program that we might benefit from, because it's very dynamic situation, and there's little ones and big ones and state level, federal level, so it would be hard to do that in a really comprehensive way, but we can make sure to kind of be highlighting when we go into each of the working groups, kind of highlighting like if there are any major policies that will have a really significant impact.
I think one thing that I think would be helpful, kind of related to what Lauren had said, is recognizing that the kind of vision of how the CCAP was going to be used when it was originally written was a while ago. And so I think some learnings of how is this actually working in terms of, like you had mentioned, being more embedded in the city than broader than that. And how, if there's anything structural in the way that we're writing these goals that would better integrate the different departments at the city that some of these kind of naturally would live in, and I don't know if that question kind of makes sense, but if a little bit about just the structure itself, and if that kind of aligns with the way that we've actually been using the CCAP or if there's any potential changes we might want to make as we're thinking of those goals that might better integrate with the way that the city operates.
So I understand what you're saying, but I think I'm having like, is there, in terms of like information I can provide? Is there something, or is it more like that's something that we just want to talk about as we're developing each of the strategies, like how it would fit?
I guess maybe it's in the, how the strategies are written, or maybe it's just in how the process works of how we're engaging with potential city partners
Yeah.
in the development process. So
Mhm.
then they're not, so then there's more ownership outside of just this little bubble that we have.
Yeah, and I guess my thought on that was that, again, we would do the action generation first.
Yeah,
And then go talk with the departments.
yeah,
And so I didn't have a 100% clear understanding of it, because since we just don't know what actions we're talking about yet.
it can come later, and it's
Yeah.
just something I wanna.
And I think for me, it'll be really interesting to see how far, if they, like, we have right now planned one working group meeting each to develop the new actions.
Mhm.
Which I'm hoping can be kind of a 2-hour session where people come in person, and it's 1 o'clock, so we might just need to carry on this discussion next month. But I think it'll be interesting to see if we feel like we can capture those in one meeting, or if we end up taking several, if it's a more iterative process, which will just, just take a little bit more time. So maybe next month we're refining the existing actions, and then maybe we'll also discuss this a little bit more, like how do we want the new action stage, to go? And we can kind of unpack, now that we're in the process, we've kind of talked about the process, but now that we're actually in it, we can kind of remind ourselves of the steps and the timelines and the dates that we're going to do things, and then make sure, we feel like we all understand how it's going to work, and that we think that'll be good. Does that sound appropriate to talk about next month?
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
Could I add a quick question for that, just to help prepare for next month too? The one question I had as you were sharing that is, you mentioned the additional FTE, and I'm just curious how that factors in terms of increasing some of that capacity, in terms of as we plan for the CCAP actions, kind of what duties and responsibilities that additional staff member would be able to bring.
Yeah.
In terms of how we structured this. The one thing I've been thinking about quite a bit is I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity to, I think I've heard some other cities have much larger staff committed to sustainability, and where a lot of the actions and work is done through that staff versus it all going through a committee. And I'm just curious how much leeway we have to do some of that work as a committee, make some of those decisions, and then how staff do more of that work on a day-to-day basis. So it's moving faster, because I think inherently this slows down a lot of the work. And since we're doing some of these sponsorships, we're still not playing a role in the day-to-day. So I understand there's probably a balance between how much of decision making has to be public versus through staff. But I'm just curious about having a discussion on that too.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Whoever came. Meeting adjourned 1:02.